Well, thank you for doing this. And the new book, Cosmic Surfer, covers
Yeah.
your journey in music as well as Sing Song. Have got much of your back catalogue as well. So it's a great time to have a career spanning chat with you.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Can you tell me about over 60 years now? Understand the Unknown Blues was formed in 1965. Was that Sydney?
Sounds about right. Yeah, 1965 in Sydney. I was a schoolboy. We had a local band in my school, and oh, I would have done anything to be in that band. So I auditioned for them. They said, nah, you're not really that good. There's a band over there in another suburb. A bunch of young guys. They're trying to do something. You'd probably fit in with them. Why don't you go over there? So I did. I was singing a song with them, and the lead guitarist, Chris Brown's dad, walked through. He was an osteopath chiropractor. And he walked through and he said, that guy's got a good voice. You ought to get him in the band. Because they were looking for someone with a really high voice. Everyone was at the time, because I had a baritone. And they said, okay. So I joined the band, and it blossomed from there. We did our first couple of shows, nervous as heck. And as time went on, we started getting some usual story. It builds up. You get better shows, better gigs. You get a following. You get a manager. My manager was Peter Cunningham. He was my brother-in-law. He turned out to be our Brian Epstein. He really got the band where it needed to be and promoted as well. Put us on a lot of universities and big shows. Got a record deal. Put a song together from our catalog of old blues songs and put our own R&B spin on it, and it became a hit. So out of being shuffled out of the school band, we suddenly ended up in a band that did really well.
That music scene in the 1960s in Australia and also in New Zealand always fascinates me. You had relatively recent migrants coming over from Europe, particularly the UK, as well as people that had longer roots in Australia. Where did you fit in with that? How far in Australia does your family go back, or was it relatively recent?
No, my family in Australia, you're kind of proud to say that, my ancestors were convicts, and we're proud of that. Look what we've done. Well, I thought, well, I must fit into that because mine go back quite a way. So we did a family search, and turned out that my great great grandfather was Sergeant John Jones, and he had 10 offspring, 10 Joneses, and that's where they came from. But he was not a convict. He was someone who kept them in line. So I kind of kept that quiet. I don't tell anybody. On my mother's side, it was French, de La Fontaine, and that went back a couple of generations. So I wasn't like the Easy Beats, who are my peers, who are a great band, who AC/DC kind of evolved out of. They were UK immigrants, and they went through that whole thing of living in those strange compounds that they didn't tell people that they would end up in. If you came out to Australia for £10, boy, some real talent did come from England at that time.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess the boom down under was sparked by the Beatles and the music coming over. And there's a blues influence as well, is that right?
Yeah, in Sydney was more of a blues R&B oriented city. Melbourne was more of a very polished pop scene. The Twilights, they were a magnificent harmony band, and Glenn Shorrock came out of that band, who went into Little River Band, which my lead guitarist was in Little River Band as well. Magnificent harmonies, and I remember they even did a show for a while where they dressed up in Sergeant Pepper's outfits and did a whole Beatles thing. It was
Was
pretty
that
amazing.
once upon a Twilight era?
It might have been. Yeah, I was pretty busy with my own career, but I'd seen them a couple of times, and I saw that, and I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. So Sydney was more blues oriented, R&B, possibly soul. There were three bands at the time that were extremely competitive. There was Phil Jones and the Unknown Blues. We were more hardcore blues. There was Python Lee Jackson, which David Bentley came out of, and he wrote "In a Broken Dream" for Rod Stewart,
Of
and
course.
he was a peer and a friend. And then there was Jeff St. John and the Id, and that was a really good band too. And they had a horn lineup, brass. So we were very competitive, in a nice way, but at the same time, there was an undercurrent of being very competitive, I thought. And did your clubs pack out? Well, yeah, they did. Ours were packed, theirs were packed. We all did very well. And it was funny, we all broke up at the same time, pretty much. The word went around through what we call in Australia musos, musicians. Hey, there's this ship, this boat called the Petraeus that's looking for musicians to go to London. Yeah, what do you think? And I'm thinking, well, yeah, that could be good. What do we have to play? Well, you got to play, the autumn leaves and things like that. I was like, oh, you got to be kidding! I'm a blues man, I mean, well, now I love those songs, of course, but back then, so we formed a band with some of the members of Python Lee Jackson, Unknown Blues, and the Id, and we formed this band. Went to London. It landed in Athens, and then we went overland to Italy, up through Rome, up through Italy, up through Europe, and landed in London. And we all kind of dispersed. So this is how it ended up. My sax player ended up in Manfred Mann's band. David Bentley ended up writing songs for Rod Stewart, and I ended up being in Quintessence. So we all kind of landed there with nothing. I mean, nothing. We didn't have management or anything. And we all just made our own connections just by being, grassroots on the scene. So that was kind of how that happened.
And did you, relatively soon after you got into London, end up on that Ladbroke Grove scene? Because the buildings there now look amazingly grand, but at the time I think they were quite cheap, dossing down.
I don't even think we might pay £200 a month for a flat there. I can't even remember. Yeah, I had probably within a couple of months ended up there somehow, some way. But I had a job in Kensington Church Street in a picture framing factory. And you'd walk in there, it was like stepping into a Dickens novel. It was amazing. And you had to put glass in picture frames and blah, blah, blah. I wasn't very good at it. I broke a lot of glass, a lot of frames. But I remember one day I was sitting at the lunch table on my break, and I saw a copy of the local paper, the Ladbroke Grove paper. I'm reading it, and there was an ad there that said, "Hip musicians wanted, Ladbroke Grove area." And I thought, well, I'm hip, I'm a musician, and I live in Ladbroke Grove. Well, it turned out to be Roger aka Ron Rothfield,
Right.
and he's the flute player. And so I called him up and went around, and we jammed, and he had a few other people jamming, and the people fell away and new people came in until we found the core group that ended up being Quintessence. I think initially Alan, who's the lead guitarist, was playing bass at the very, very beginning. One day he picked up a guitar and he just tore it apart. And he said, "Man, you should be playing guitar, not bass." So Shumba, who was on rhythm guitar at the time, he went over to bass, and Alan became the permanent lead guitarist who really took the band into a new level.
And that was one thing about the group, is that you were groundbreaking in terms of your musical style and the lyrical themes of your music. I understand much of that was influenced by spirituality. Was this around the period that you were changing your philosophical outlook?
Yeah, I'd always had a fascination with Eastern philosophy. I had always felt there would be a master for me, a teacher that could open up a gateway to a broader way of thinking on life and reality and why am I here and what is the purpose of human life above and beyond what I'd come out of a patriarchal philosophical background. And so when Swami Ambikananda came on the scene, he just changed my whole outlook and approach to life, why I was here, what's my purpose, what is the purpose of human life on this planet, what are we here to do. I think in the book it says he abbreviated in the book what Swamiji said, the purpose of life is to bring heaven on earth. Well, the full quote was, the purpose of human life is to realize the absolute reality of the divine whilst in the relative form of the human body. And in that experience, be overwhelmed with the ecstatic joy that we're all connected to an infinite ocean of divine love and creative expression. So that was what he said to me. And that kind of like, whoa, that sounds really good. How do I do that? That was the next step. And, he said, well, overcome your obsession with attachment to sensory gratification and sensual, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, okay, yeah, okay, I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on that. But in the meantime, I will in somehow, some way, filter it into the music that we are doing right now. And through my songwriting and the band's songwriting and the band's musical influence, we were able to convey it pretty well for the time, really well. And they were exciting performances. They were charged. We were never able to capture what we did on record, what we had in live performances. They were outrageous. They really were. Those were the days.
Chris Blackwell saw some of those early performances and ultimately signed you to Island Records. And Island Records in that period was and became one of the greatest labels, an incredible array of releases across a range of musical styles. Can you tell me about Chris and working with Island Records?
Yeah, you're totally right. Island Records was the Uber label, as it's been called. It was about looking for creativity. Yes, record sales were very important, but creativity was a major part of this. It wasn't cookie cutter music, it wasn't pop music. It was what artists are out there in this revolutionary time that are creative and are different. And Chris had that. He had that. I mean, he knew what originality was. He knew what talent was. He knew that if he promoted it, more than likely it would be popular. So when he heard the band, he knew we were different, and he figured there was a place for us. So he wanted to sign us up pretty quickly, real quickly. And we'd had some other people interested. I think Warner Brothers, Roger Rom, the flute player, who's the leader of the band, he'd been looking into that. And the word was that he'd mentioned it to Chris. And Chris said, well, what do you want? And we said, well, complete artistic freedom. He said, okay, you got it. Come up to Island Studios and we'll sign a contract. So when we did, he got the recording rights. He got agency. He was our booking agency and management for a period of time. So they got, when you signed with Island, especially in the beginning, they got all three. Yeah. And that's when it all started. I mean, very quickly, we had the first album went in the charts. The second one went pretty high in the charts. So for me, it was a journey down a road that I was very familiar with. I'd already been down that road in Australia. Had hit the road with the Unknown Blues, had played in residencies 5 or 6 nights a week, had record success, done all of that. So when I hit England, I was a pretty well seasoned kid in terms of music. So I was ready for the next level. For my bandmates, it was pretty much something new for them. So probably, it was exciting for me, but even more so for them because from being living room musicians to, on Island Records and having your first album in the charts, it's a really, really big deal. And playing major venues with major bands, suddenly
Royal
there we
Albert
were.
Hall?
The Royal Albert Hall, we'd been around for a while. That was 71, Christmas Eve. And that was a charge, let me tell you. You walk out on stage, right? And there's a sea of applause that sounds like the ocean, waves of the ocean. I can remember it like whoosh. And they were ready for us. They were waiting for us to come on stage, and another wild, crazy gig where people just went wild. The headline was, on Melody Maker, Quintessence sold out the Royal Albert Hall. But guess what? They were banned. And I thought, what the heck? We were banned? Well, our manager and a couple other people were giving out sticks of incense. Not a light, but giving it out as a gift as you came in. But I guess the people who own the Royal Albert Hall thought, someone might get the bright idea to light it. And they might. I mean, looking back on it, it was kind of a silly thing to do, but it made a headline. All publicity is good, they say. I don't know.
And the group also famously connected with Glastonbury Fair or Glastonbury Festival as well.
Yeah, the first one in 1970, I think we filled in for the Kinks, who decided they didn't want to do it. So that was a good break. Yeah, and word of mouth. People just came from all over the place, walking through the fields until they got to the place where the stage was. It was a really cool event. The second one was even bigger. That's the one where they built the stage in the shape of a pyramid, covered it in clear plastic, and placed it on where two ley lines cross, where the Druids' ley lines cross, out in the middle of that field. And the energy was so strong on that one. I think it was on a full moon. And so you look in the distance, you see this pyramid just glowing because it was all lit up. And we did that one. I don't know if we did that one we did it with Traffic and Mark Bolan, or maybe, they'd made a movie out of it called Glastonbury Fair, Fayre, and I'm pretty sure those guys were on it. But yeah, another amazing experience. Much bigger crowd the second time round. Yeah, first time probably had about, I don't know, a few thousand people. The second one had quite a few people.
Another figure pivotal is John Barham, your producer. Can you tell me about him? Because he's also worked on some great material as well, and he really added to the work in the group.
Yeah, John's got an amazing catalog. He worked extensively with George Harrison, not just on All Things Must Pass, but I think his first musical connection with George was on Wonderwall, where that Eastern influence came in. John is a classical piano player, and his profile looked like Beethoven. I always tell him he had a bust of Beethoven on his piano. I said, man, your profile, maybe you're Beethoven in another life. I mean, an amazing classical pianist with a deep Eastern musical background. He worked with Ravi Shankar extensively. He worked on that album East Meets West with Yehudi Menuhin and Ravi Shankar. And so between Ravi and himself and George Harrison, they were all very close friends. So John was a real close friend of George Harrison, and did a lot of work with him and did a lot of arranging for him on a lot of his stuff. So John is still a close friend of mine. We talk occasionally on the phone. I send him a copy of the book, which he likes a lot. I think we were introduced to him through Stanley Barr, who was our manager at the time. And Stanley was a friend of John's. But John has remained a close friend over these years. He's just a great guy, an amazing musical talent. His influence on the first album was stunning. The way he brought those tamburas in at the end on Midnight Mode, where he slowed them down in such a way. I mean, I don't even know how he did it, but he always had these great ideas and musical contributions to the band. He was our George Martin, basically. What we had, he took it like even further, and very easy to work with. Always great vibes, very creative. But that track, Midnight Mode, really captured something on the first album. It starts off with me just singing a cappella, a Vedic little piece. And then it goes into a long flute solo, really nice flute solo. And then the band takes off with Alan on electric guitar, and he just tears it apart. He just rips it up. And I think I'm on Hammond organ in the background. And then it just kind of fades out and slowly disappears into this void of tambura that goes on for like 5 minutes. So to put a track that has one note on it, but millions of harmonics ringing out, of course, on your first album in a Western rock band was really revolutionary. And years later, a friend of mine, Steve Housden, who's a good friend still, and lead guitarist for Little River Band, was in the Phil Jones band. His wife said, well, was that your album that had one note on it for 5 minutes? I said, yes, it was. She said, oh, okay, well, that was different. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I can't say enough about John. He's just the greatest on every level.
You were basically releasing an album a year. How do you
Yes.
see the succession of albums in terms of how things developed from In Blissful Company to Quintessence, Dive Deep, etc.?
Well, we always were trying to capture what we did live. So I think we probably were allowing ourselves to jam even more. On the second album, I think there's a really good jam on The Sea of Immortality. That had Twilight Zones on it, which was another band composition. Some of the songs on the second album, the Quintessence self-titled one, were solo songs that I'd written. Jesus Buddha, Sea of Immortality, Higher Mount Kailash. So what we were trying to do was just expand everything as much as we could. But you're always limited to time lengths, blah, 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 blah. The third album, I think we expanded it even further with songs like Dance for the One, that starts off with a really beautiful long flute solo and then goes into a strange mellotron thing that I put in there to join it into the actual song itself. It goes into the song and then tears up into a great guitar solo. A lot of the stuff we did, we improvised in the studio in one take. We didn't like labor over things. The guitar solo on Dance for the One that I was singing with him, we did that in the moment. And Alan was just mimicking me. I mean, we had such a connection intuitively, all of us, that we could listen to each other, look at each other, and follow each other and know where to go. So we tried to capture that in the studio as well, and we did on some of the tracks. So yeah, I think we expanded that ability to the studio as best we could.
You were attracting fans, the likes of people like John Lennon.
Isn't that interesting? I didn't know. That's a funny story. We were recording at Trident Studios in Soho in London, and we took a lunch break. So I went off to a Chinese restaurant not too far from the studio, a few blocks away. And I'm sitting there having my meal, and there's a guy on the other side of the restaurant in the corner in, white clothes, long hair and a beard, and he's looking at me, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm kind of used to this, people, because I was well known at that point. If he comes over, well, I'm happy to sign something, but I'm going to finish my food because I got to go back and finish recording. And I'm thinking, when are you going to come over so I can get this out of the way? Well, sure enough, he stands up, comes on over, and he says, "Hi, you're Shiva, right?" I said, "Yes, I am." And so I'm reaching over for the pen, getting ready to sign a napkin or something. He says, "You're Shiva, right?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, we like you." I said, "Okay." I said, "Who's we?" He said, "Me and John." I'm thinking, "Oh, okay. Who the heck's John?" "Okay, who's John?" He said, "John Lennon." I said, "Huh? Excuse me?" He said, "Yeah, we like your band." I said, "Okay. Well, gee, that's great." I didn't say, "What can I do for you?" I was like speechless. He said, "Yeah." He said, "How would you like to come down to John's mansion?" I said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I come back all the time to just take care of business. We have a caretaker there, and I come back to make sure everything's okay. And John can't come back to England because he's kind of stuck in the States due to the visa problems because of blah, 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 blah." And I said, "Oh." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Come down. You'd be our guest. Come down to Tittenhurst and Virginia Waters near Ascot, and you can hang out and just enjoy." I said, "Sure. Why not?" So I did. And it was an experience. I mean, quite clearly his energy was still there. In that video of Imagine, you see the white mansion in the background. You see the white piano in the main living room area. Everything, the carpet's white, ceiling's white, the piano's white. Julian Lennon's Gypsy Caravan was still on the property. I mean, it was like 70 acres plus in an area that if you just had a house with a nice big backyard, you were doing pretty good. This was a huge place. There was a little gazebo in the middle of a kind of a small lake. So going into the main room, you saw the white piano there and a big giant picture of him and Yoko on the wall, bigger than life size. Because in those days, full frontals and full rear end shots were not a big deal, especially for John and Yoko. There was this giant picture of them naked with their accountant kind of superimposed in between them with his arm around them. And this was apparently his gift to them. So they stuck it on the wall. So that was there. And then I got to sit down and play the, I didn't play it. I just kind of hit a couple of notes on the white grand piano just for the heck of it. Just his energy being there was really cool. I was sorry I never got to meet him, but that's the way life goes, you know? So yeah, it was quite an experience to be invited down there. I had been invited to George's house several times because I had the connection with John Barham and so forth, but I never had the time to go down. We were really busy with Quintessence, really busy. If we weren't touring, we were rehearsing. If we weren't rehearsing, we were recording. If we weren't recording, those of us who were into the spiritual side of it were at what we called kirtan, which was like we'd be singing and dancing and listening to Swamiji either read from a spiritual book or what we considered he was just like going into states of ecstatic joy and inspiring and energizing. So we were really busy. And as much as I would have loved to have gone to George's place, I never got to make that.
So am I right that your next album, Self, was that RCA, the label?
It was, yeah. We went over to RCA. Chris Blackwell was disappointed that we didn't take the US deal that he'd gone out of his way to get for us. Because to be honest with you, I wasn't even aware of what was going down at that point because I didn't take care of much of that. It was between Raja Ram and management and things like that. So I just kind of went with the flow. My main focus was on the music and, where we could go with it. So we got dropped, and I thought, oh, I wonder why that happened. Well, I found out years later that's why it happened. So we went over to RCA, which really wasn't a progressive rock label. So I'm figuring they probably didn't really know how to promote us the way Chris did or anything like that. So we did the Self album, which actually was one of the best albums we did, from my perspective. There was a song written by Mahadev, Dave Codling, called You Never Stay the Same. And I tagged a Vishnu Narayan chant on the end that we just made up in the studio. And a great guitar. And the band played so well on that. The solo, I could highly recommend you want to listen to a great solo that the band did, all improvised in the moment. We never went over it and did it again. We just played it and went. Cosmic Surfer, the title of the book. I wrote that song for the band. That's on that album. Shambhu wrote a really beautiful ballad called Wonders of the Universe, which is really popular. So there were some great songs. Hallelujah. I wrote that for the band. I redid that with Ralph Bouvert, Rudra Bouvert in Switzerland. Did a really nice version of it with him. And he did a great version of Cosmic Surfer too. He rearranged it, slowed it down, put a lot of tambouras in it and big harmonies. So I got to redo a lot of those songs with Ralph Rudra. I think the Self album really was really great, a really good album. Shame it wasn't on Island Records. It would have got out to more people.
It makes no sense to me how was it you and Dave were pushed out of the group when you were at its core?
That I was what?
Pushed out of the group?
Well, kind of, yeah, kind of, sort of. Had a friend come up to me. It was actually Gopala, the artist who did all the covers, those extravagantly beautiful covers for Island, except for the third one. He did the first two. He came up to me and he said, "So I can't believe they did that." He said, "They just decapitated the band. They just cut the head off the band. Why'd they do that?" Just differences, ego differences, musical direction differences, personality differences. We'd been together at least 3 years or longer. I mean, when you're in a band, it's like being married to somebody. You get to see all the warts and whatever. You either get on with people and you move along or you don't. I think in retrospect, it was a mistake. We should have stayed together a bit longer because we could have got a US tour and we were ready to make the major breakthrough in the US. We were ready for it, but never happened. But it didn't matter because life took a different turn for me. And I started doing things that were very fulfilling in terms of upliftment of my consciousness and everyone else was around me that would come to my workshops.
Tell us what you did after Quintessence musically.
Oh, a band called Kala. Dave and I put together this band called Kala. Kala was another name for Shiva. I didn't want people to think that this was Quintessence, me copying what I'd done then. And of course, my name's Shiva, and I didn't want to call it Shiva, so we called it Kala, which is a Tibetan name for Shiva. So Dave and I put this together, and we got a record deal with Bradley's Records, a subsidiary of ATV, so Lou Grade Company, and went through quite a few different lineups in that band. We got the record label. They put some money into it so that we could rehearse, start putting an album together, and then after a few tracks, you'll notice on that album that there's a lot of tracks that it progresses into different sounds, which is fine with me. It was predominantly my material. Dave contributed 2 really good songs, Traveling Home, which is kind of like a boogie rock thing, and another one called, probably one of my favorite tracks on the album, one that he wrote. It'll come back to me.
Sun's on there, isn't it?
Sun is one that I wrote, and that's known as like probably the best song on the album. I think it's a good song. It's a great song. But this one of Dave's, do we really know what we're here to do? I'll be awakened to the call of a new song and lighting in the dawn. And ride the energy sunlight excuse me. Life's far too serious to take seriously. And it's called Thirsty Generation. And I got to use my voice in a whole different way and do harmonies that I hadn't used before. It ended up being a very interesting album because there were several different lineups. One of the more interesting aspects of that band is it had gone through different changes. Dave moved on to another project, and I had other people come in, and then other people come in, till I reached the lineup that you hear on Still Got Time, some of those tracks. We were all set to do a major tour. Bradley's Records had advertised it, Marquee Club, blah, 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 blah. I had somehow met Michael Caine's manager, Michael Caine, the actor. I don't know how I met him. I can't remember. In the book, it says, deals were signed in a pub over a beer and a handshake. Well, maybe that's how it happened. But anyway, Michael Caine's manager thought this was a great thing to get involved with, and he gave me, like, I don't know, £10,000 to float the band. It was a lot of money back then, a lot of money now. And I floated the band. We could rehearse. The guys were free to play anywhere else they wanted, just be ready for the tour. Da, 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 anything in the studio we need you for, blah, blah, blah. Well, one of the guys in the band came to me and said, hey, listen, it was only like 2 weeks away from the tour. We have decided that you need to pay us more money or we're not doing the tour. I said, excuse me? You're not doing the tour? It's coming up. It's advertised. We're doing the tour. He said, well, unless you come up with more money, we're not going to do it. I said, you mean the whole band? He said, yep, the whole band. I said, you know what? There is no more money. And well, we want to get what you're getting. I said, we're all getting the same. I said, I could take more because I borrowed the money, but I'm not. He said, well, we're not going to do it. I said, there's no more money. That's it. We're going to go out and tour and it'll all start again. He said, well, sorry, you're going to have to come up with more money. Well, then I'm in panic mode. What the hell am I going to do? What am I going to tell the record label, management, agents? Just at that moment, within a day or two, Chris Brown, lead guitarist from the Unknown Blues, phone call. He said, oh, g'day, mate. I said, who's this? He said, it's Chris Brown, Unknown Blues. You remember? I said, yeah, of course. I said, well, where are you? He said, I'm in London. I said, what are you doing here? He said, oh, I come over with all my mates, all my bandmates. Well, we want to play. Got any ideas? I said, do I ever? I said, my band just went on strike. I said, do you think we can pull something together in 2 weeks? He said, of course we can. What are you, crazy? So the guy who's created the revolution in the band came back and said, well, what's the answer? I said, you know what, guys? I said, I'm really sorry to say this, but I got to let you go. He said, huh? He said, are you sure? I said, yeah, got to let you go. It's not going to work. I don't have any more money. So bye-bye. So that was the end of them. And Chris Brown jumped on board with a red hot Aussie band under the banner of Carla. And some of those live recordings are on that Carla album. And oh man, it was an ass-kicking rock band from down under. And Keith Relf did the same. He never got a credit on the album. He did the sound and the production on those live tracks. Keith Relf, lead singer from the Yardbirds and songwriter. But what a great band, and how fortunate that he showed up at that moment to keep things going. I have it on my YouTube channel. One was called Before You Leave, and the other one's called Come On Round to My House. I was just lucky that they showed up. It was different lineup again, guy on a Hammond organ and keyboards. He featured a lot on the live tracks. Chris on lead guitar, great drummer, great bass player, and me doing my thing out front. They're live recordings at the Marquee Club, those ones. So that was kind of the lifespan of Carla. And then the record label decided, well, ATV, that was the parent of Bradley's Records, they decided to, I think they fired the general manager, who was really the man who believed in my talent and said, yeah, you're an album band. You're not a pop singer. You're not. And I said, no, I'm not. I said, we'll do serious music. And he said, okay, well, we'll sign you up. So I signed up under those conditions. When they got rid of him, the management of ATV, who were what I consider old geezers, they were like in their late 40s, in suits and ties. They called me in for a meeting and they said, you know what? We're going to dissolve the band. I said, okay, why are you going to do that? So, well, the way things are going, we just want you. And you're the only one on contract anyway. So we're going to take all the equipment back and blah, 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 blah. So that was the end of the band. And they said, well, we want you to come up with a pop single. I said, I could try and write something, but I don't know if you're going to like it. So I wrote a couple of songs that I thought were good. Did not impress them enough because I think it probably still had too much of a blues influence, but they were repetitive and what I thought they were looking for. They said, look, this is really what we want you to do. I said, what's that? We want you to put on a glitter suit. And I'm looking at them thinking, these old geezers, they're freaking nuts. We want you to put on a glitter suit and, get this, stuff a banana down your trousers. First of all, I thought, well, you think I'm not well enough endowed to put on a glitter suit? Do I need a banana? I was stunned. I was looking at them thinking, you guys are morons. You're 20 years older than me, and you're talking like you're 12 years old. I said, I don't think I can do that. No, that's a big no. And they said, well, no, this is what we want. This is the way the trend of the music business goes. Glitter and Gary Glitter and Mark Bolan, everyone, even, oh yeah, Bowie, everybody. You got to do this. Otherwise, we're not interested. And I said, well, I'm not doing it. And I said, well, we're not interested. I said, well, let me go then. Free to do something else. This is not in the book. They said, no, we're not going to let you go. Well, why not? Because it's not. I said, what are you going to do? He said, we're going to put you on this shelf. You'll be a tax write-off. I said, oh, really? I said, well, I'll sue you. They said, go ahead. We're ATV. Give it a shot. So that was really the end of my career in England. It was shut down by ATV. There was nothing I could do. After that, I went back to Australia and formed the Phil Jones Band. But that's why I kind of stopped there.
The rest of the 70s into the 80s, you went from Australia and then over to the United States?
Yeah, I went back and formed that band with Steve Housden, Little River Band, Mel Wakeford, he went in the Little River Band. They're all really great, great players. Really knew how to play in the pocket, always really right there for me as a singer, but just drove the music without overplaying. And it was a great band. We had a good run there. We played at what was known a very popular venue called the Palm Beach RSL Club. And we packed that place out. We played at another good club in Sydney called French's, packed that out. We went down to Thredbo in the Snowy Mountains, the ski valley. We did a residency there. We played a lot together. And Steve and I and Mal have remained really good friends over the years. And we're in contact constantly. In fact, there's a picture of me, one and only picture of me with Steve in the book. We were down in Thredbo at the ski valley. Yeah, so that was a really good band. And you know what? We did a live radio show on 2JJ, which when it went FM became 2JJJ. It was a government-run station, so there were no commercials, and it was purely devoted to rock music and creative expression. It was created under the Whitlam government, and he was really into creative expression and encouraging local artists. So we went on 2JJ, and we did, I think, 6 live tracks. And I did them, and I was like, yeah, this was good. It went down well and helped us get more gigs. And I forgot about it. And then, I don't know, it must be 40 or 50 years later, Steve Housden, my guitar player and good friend, he said, I've still got those shows on cassette. He said, do you want them? I said, well, can you email it to me or text it or anything? He said, sure. I said, are they any good? He said, yeah. I said, they're really good. I said, I bet I sound like shit. He said, man, you sound great. It's live. And so when he sent it to me, he was right. I thought, you know what? He saved that on a cassette tape. In the book, it says in a shoebox, maybe. But it was great that Steve saved it all these years because there's some great songs on there, probably 5 or 6. And 2 of them were instrumentals written by Steve and John Kemp, who's the other guitar player in the band. What a great player he was.
America. What led you to America?
Initially, it was to work on an album for somebody, produce an album, but it didn't pan out that way. And so, I made some roots there. I met a few people. I actually met one of my early influences in the Unknown Blues was Paul Butterfield. I met him in Woodstock, and it was just nice to touch base with someone who'd influenced our music. It just blossomed from there. I went back to Australia, came back to America. I can't remember we're going back 50 years. I'm trying to remember the sequence. Lived in Manhattan for a while and did those recordings. Millionaire is, believe it or not, has become the most popular song on my channel. Everybody wants to be a millionaire, everyone doing all they can. But the last laugh is on us for causing such a fuss. There's nothing else in the world. You get so little for so much. You'll always be a star, whoever you are. So that song's got more views than anything. Except for Sea of Bliss, which Phil, the author, put it on his channel. It's had 2 million views now. Yeah, it's a 30-second Vedic poem that I recite. It's only 30 seconds over tambura. It's really basic. Tambura being the drone instrument in Indian music, for those who may not know. Yeah, Millionaire. So I recorded that in Manhattan. And then I did a tribute to Star Trek. I have always been a Trekkie ever since the early days. And I thought, I'm going to write a song about Star Trek. So I wrote this really cool kind of rock and roll song. And the person who was involved in the promotion of it, he said, well, let's send it to Paramount and we can, put it out to help promote the first Star Trek movie. And we got a letter back saying, if you ever play this song anywhere, we will sue you. So that was the end of that. But the song is still around. They have this big Star Trek gathering somewhere in Iowa where they say that Captain Kirk was born. And it's a big Trekkie convention. So I sent it to them and he said, well, we'll listen to it and, maybe next time we'll play it. So, yeah, I'm still a big Trekkie, I have to say. Sounds a bit nerdy, but you know what? I would go to a convention and dress up like what would I dress up like? I don't know. I have to think about it. I'd dress up like somebody. Me! I dress up like me.
Given the advancement of the internet being able to link people up, the interest in your work in Quintessence has only grown over the years. 16 years ago, you played again at Glastonbury. There's been various reissues, and you're still popular and getting your name out there. And I think you guys are underrated, really. You're one of the key pioneering bands of the late 60s, early 70s, alongside groups like Hawkwind.
Yes, they were definitely our peers. We double billed with Hawkwind and we knew them. I think they lived in Ladbroke Grove too, same as us, or Notting Hill somewhere. Yeah, the difference was they stayed together. Had the band stayed together, we would have the same kind of legacy. We'd still be playing. And I think the reason why there's not a lot about it is because the way it ended so quickly. Once I left the band, it didn't last long after I'd gone. I'm not saying that I was the only reason they were good, but when you lose a key member of a band and you can't replace it, it kind of takes a dive, a nosedive. And that's why it ended so quickly. And that was the end of the legacy, other than what we left behind. But my career went on in America doing the sound work. I was able to join the dots coming across the didgeridoo in Australia, my home country. I played it, and it became apparent that there's something about this instrument that reminds me of a tambura, the drone. And what is it? So I identified it, and it's the harmonic resonance. Aside from the one continuous note, there are these harmonics that ring out around the didgeridoo, around the tambura, and the one note in blues. And that's how Phil Marks, the author, was able to join that one note theme from the very beginning right through to the work with the didgeridoo. And so as I went further into it, sometimes the harmonics would just explode around me. And I thought, you know what, there's something really healing and uplifting about this, aside from the breath work, because you're constantly doing the pranayama, circular breathing, resonating through all your nasal cavities, your chest, the pranayama. I mean, medically proven to significantly reduce sleep apnea, stimulating the pituitary gland, which in metaphysics is the portal and the gateway to higher consciousness, lowers high blood pressure, relaxing heart muscles. The list goes on and on. I mean, I'm not name dropping, but we were at Olivia Newton-John's house in Malibu one time, and one of her healer friends was there with an EKG machine. He said, let's measure your brain waves while you play. I only played for like a minute or two, and the theta wavelength flat line, which is kind of like that point of deep, clear, focused consciousness. So in my workshops, I would say, think of your mind as a hard drive in a computer full of programs, and those programs have created your personality, and those programs or impressions have gone into the hard drive and they stick, and they create a mask over this state of clear consciousness. I said, what if you had a device that could clear the hard drive of your mind and get into that place of clear and focused consciousness without a hassle? What would you do there? Infinite possibilities. You could reinvent yourself. You could reach out to a higher state of existence. You could succeed in anything in life, perhaps. The options are endless. And so when I would go and do the workshops, I would teach it that way. We would bring an instrument for everybody in the workshop to blow in it. And all it is flapping your lips, loose lips. It's the embouchure of a tuba, not a trumpet. Trumpet are tight lips. These are loose lips. And I would just encourage people. The thought of doing circular breathing can be daunting. And a lot of people say, oh, I can't do that. It's too much. I say, you don't have to. All you got to do is take a deep breath in your nose, blow out your mouth very slowly till you reach a point of expelling all the air from your lungs. Pause for about 3, 4, 5 seconds. Relax. Take another deep breath in and blow out. And that is the exercise I want you to do every morning if you're interested in this. and see what it does for you. Now, people that wanted to go further, I would teach them circular breathing in a private lesson, the twang, which is the enhancement of harmonics, and the animal sounds, which the Aboriginal people do. So for me, the instrument is a shamanic tool. It's a self-empowering tool. It's an accelerator into states of deep and clear focused consciousness that could possibly take much longer with other techniques. I'm not putting down any other form of meditation or anything. And what else is good about it? It's tangible. You're holding something physical in your hands. You're not sitting there just trying to get somewhere. I'm not saying that's not good either. It is good. But I was looking for something I found something that's a lot easier for me. And when I would share it around the country, we did this for 20 years, my wife and I. 20 years in a motorhome, going sometimes 3 dates a week. A lot of churches, universities, yoga studios, wellness clinics, anywhere that would. Sometimes we went to schools occasionally, seminars. We took it everywhere. And I was able to feed in with this instrument that the ultimate purpose, if you're interested in this, is what we would call self-realization, that your inner being is connected to an infinite ocean of consciousness. Like you're a bubble floating around in this sea of joy, Yogananda said. That's what I used it for, to enhance my connection with that and sharing it. So we 20 years in a motorhome on the road constantly, never stopping. And I ended up becoming a minister because a lot of the churches wouldn't take me in unless I was. And I'm thinking, well, this is ridiculous. I'm the same guy as I was before they called me Reverend Phil. So why didn't you take me then? Oh, well, and if it didn't matter. So I would go into churches where ministers were on sabbatical and they needed someone to fill in, where I came as a guest speaker and I would follow with a workshop. A lot of churches wanted me to stay and be a resident minister, but I thought, nope, not interested in politics in the church. I'm heading off to the next church or wherever. Bye-bye. See you next year. So that's how we did it for 20 years. And it was, for me, very fulfilling because there was no gap between me and the group, the audience. In a band, there's you, and there's a space, and then there's the audience. And usually, if you're in a bigger band, you're whisked off. You don't get to see anybody. With this, I got to have some really personal contact with the people. I would be talking to them in the workshops. If they did a private session, I would be speaking to them in that. Yeah, so very fulfilling. It took the Quintessence experience to the next level where it needed to be. So all my life's experiences, the ups and the downs, led me to the most fulfilling experience it is music, it's sound, my musical and spiritual expression.
These themes are touched on in the Cosmic Surf book. I understand people can get a copy of that on Amazon. And is the YouTube channel the main way that people can see what you're doing, or there are other ways?
Yeah, you can go to YouTube and just type in Shiva Jones. It'll bring up a lot of songs that I did with Quintessence, that I've done with other musicians, a lot of different styles of music, from rock to blues to Quintessence to deeply spiritual things. I think that story that he put in the book about Bucksnort was really funny. Really funny. Traveling down the I-40 through Tennessee into Arkansas, we come across a town called Bucksnort. And I saw I said, who would call a town Bucksnort? That is a ridiculous name for a town. I thought, I got to put it in a song. And then you go a little further and you come to Toadsuck, another funny name. Well, that's how it is in America. It's funny names for towns. Well, I mean, Australia's pretty funny. Think about Woolloomooloo, Wollongong. Anyway, so I put it in the song, and we had met some carnies on the road, people who are carny people, and they have their own language. They put "kiz" in front of their words and create their own pig Latin, as it were. And so it goes, I was on my way back down to Bucksnort, Tennessee. Thought I might just grab me a job in the local Kizarney in the carnival, right? I learned to reel 'em in. Oh, with the sleight of my hand, it set me up because I want to be a politician. Call the market, boom, boom. And that's where I hooked up with my really great guitar player and good friend, Ronnie Levin. And he's in Pensacola. He's great slide guitar player. You'll hear that on Bucksnort, Tennessee. It's called Snake Oil. snake oil salesman. I don't know why I brought that up. I just thought it was really funny. Bucksnort. Who calls a place Bucksnort or Toadsuck? But you're in the deep south. Anything's possible.
What a life. And it's been great to talk to you, Shiva, and listen back to the Quintessence music, which, as I said before, is pioneering.
Yes, on the channel I put Dance for the One Up, which has one of the great guitar solos on it. Yeah, so yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.